DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Our coverage of Super Rugby Round 8 continues with an Australian perspective as always, and it's a very warm welcome to a great old mate who we met in Paris sitting there at the World Cup, and it's Geoff Parkes from the Raw out of Melbourne. And every week, Geoff, you do your wrap, an article about the weekend. And I get a feeling that this one's going to be about the balloon is about to be pricked for those Australian teams in the top six, or at least a couple of them. Am I right?
Yeah, well, that's right. And there's been a lot of, and nice to see you, Marty, and thanks for having me on. There's been a lot of talk this year about the competition evening up and how exciting that's been. And some of that attached to the Australian teams, closing the gap, as it were, to the New Zealand sides. And, I cautioned a few weeks ago that we should, wait at least until halfway and get a sense of what happens when there's more crossover matches and the depths of the squad start to get tested. And I think we're starting to see that now. And, look, there's a couple of strong Australian sides. The Reds, even though they lost in Hamilton, they're going to finish in the top three. Agreed. And they're going to be hard work for whoever they play.
Agreed.
The Brumbies have been to Auckland and won in Auckland, and you have to give them a tick for that. They will make the finals because of the way their draw is. If they win their expected home games, they'll be sweet as well. I'm not sure how strong they are, but they'll be there at the end of the year. But we're starting to see now, obviously, the Waratahs have had a couple of spankings in a row. Mm-hmm. The Force had a good win on Saturday night against the Highlanders, but they're about to hit a really tough road as well, coming to New Zealand for 2 games. They play 3 New Zealand sides in a row now. And so we're just starting to see all this level out, a bit more of the reality kick in. And I think the real story this year, Marty, is not so much about the Australian sides improving, but it's really about the ascendancy of Moana Pasifika. They have been the spark that's been lit under the Super Rugby comp.
Yeah, look, Tony Johnson talking about that. We've got that massive matchup coming now this weekend. Blues playing MP, awesome. And up until even the start of this year, I think that anyone who knows anything about Super Rugby, if you're going through and you're doing your picks, you say, well, that's a win for the Blues, that's a win. Not anymore, and especially with the momentum created and history created by Moana. 2 wins in a row, beating the Crusaders, beating a New Zealand side, winning away from home and doing that. And now, with a sniff in their nostrils, that they know that if they beat the Blues, they go into the top 6 just about, if not in there, and coming home with a wet sail. So, yeah, look, it's a delightful story, isn't it? And part of that, Geoff, is also, and I know that you echo this sentiment as well, is that both them and the Drua, none of us want them to be novelty teams. None of them want, I keep using that word, none of them want, us to have these teams in there for the sake of having them. And they've got to be competitive. They've got to stand on their own 2 feet in every way, financially as well as being competitive on the field. But the first way that you've got to establish yourself is winning games. And this is what they're doing right now.
No, absolutely. And I think you put that really well, in terms of the novelty aspect. And that's not meant to be derogatory. It's just how it was when these 2 teams came in. And look, what we're seeing is it's not just Artie Severe, it's not just Tano Umaga. There's a whole lot of people in that organisation that's all come together. They've got some great talent in there, a bit of experience as well, some underrated players. Tamatini at halfback, Danny Tuala in midfield. They've got key guys in key areas that are Miracle Whalangi, obviously outstanding this year. And we're starting to see that now. They've scored 40 points or more in 4 of their 7 games. And then in the other games, that the ones they've lost, they've been high scoring as well. There's no problem for them to score points. And you mentioned now, obviously, this matchup this week against the Blues. How fantastic is that? It really is starting to look like the Blues and Moana are competing for one final spot. If we say the top 3 stays the same, we add the Brumbies, We potentially add the Hurricanes. I think they'll be good enough to make it.
I hope so.
Then it really comes down to Moana and the Blues competing for one spot. And they still have to play each other, not just this week, but they've got 2 matches to come against each other. So whoever wins both of those, I think they'll be sweet. If they split them, then it's still going to be a dogfight right to the end. And imagine us this time last year talking about Moana Pacific potentially beating the Blues twice or splitting one of the games. It just wouldn't have, we would have been laughed at.
No.
And yet, on form, you'd have to say they're almost going in this week as favourites.
Well, again, repeat that out loud. But on form. Having said that, the confidence the Blues will get just from getting another W, and that if they had lost to the Hurricanes, mate, it was gone. It was over. You're not coming back from 1-6. We always thought last year the Crusaders could do it, but eventually you have to get to a stage where you're winning 6 or 7 games, and no team seems capable of that. Maybe the Chiefs, but no one else. Let's finish on what's going to happen in Brisbane this weekend, because since about round 4, I've been looking at this fixture thinking this is going to determine to me who's the best Australian side. New South Wales were great at home, but shipping 102 points in 2 games is just really, I've now written them completely off. But the Reds hosting a rested Brumbies, obviously the Brisbane home advantage they get, but it's a rested Brumbies side as well. So call that one for me.
Yeah, look, I think there is a clear class gap between the Reds and the other Australian sides, including the Brumbies. Look, they'll be. I think the rested thing is a good point. Steve Larkham, he's still a young developing coach, but he's shrewd. He'll have his side up. There's no question for that. But we haven't even seen the best of the Reds this year. They've only been playing in patches. I think they've played well against the New Zealand sides without winning, but I think they're still building. They have got players coming back now that had missed earlier in the year. So I think they'll be too good, and I think they'll consolidate their spot in the top 3. But I do expect the Brumbies to win the other games that they need to win.
So 4 Australian teams that have been in the top 6, I think, for 3 weeks in a row now, that take a snapshot of it, Aussie rugby fans, because it's not going to be like that at the end of the year.
No, they've manipulated the draw, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just it was a good thing to do. There was a bit of a vibe and a buzz around Super Rugby at the start of the year. It would have been silly to kill that, with some lopsided Trans-Tasman sort of games in round 1 or 2. That wouldn't make sense. So they've done the right thing. But, it's what happens after 14 rounds, isn't it, that's important, not what happens after 4 or 5. And we're starting to see that sort of, as I said at the start, level out now, and sides are finding their right position. And the Waratahs are the best example of that. Once the blowtorches come on them, we're really finding that they're not ready yet. They'll be a better side next year, but, that's next year.
The Roar, it's the wrap. Read that article, Geoff. We thank you so much. And I'll just go back to Paris, where we fell in love with the All Blacks against Ireland, didn't we? I still think it's the greatest game of rugby I've ever been at, mate, in the city of love.
No, it was brilliant. It was just a great weekend. Obviously, we had the Springboks France match as well that weekend, and if you didn't love that, well, then you don't have a pulse, really, do you? It was just brilliant to be there. And it was such a shame we weren't able to finish things off in the final. But, that's sport and that's life, and we get on with it, don't we?
Appreciate your time as always, my man.
As always, Marty. Thank you.
DSPN.